What's up, Shred Sexies? Welcome back, Death to the Fingers. I was thinking about doing this video later, but someone made a good point. They're like, if you do it early, we have more time to basically grab some of these plugins, and plus there's a lot of great sales coming up. I know Plugin Alliance like to do like 4 or 5 plugins for like 60 or 70 bucks. It's crazy. So most of the stuff you can pick up on those sale items. It's awesome. So we're going to go over my favorite plugins here from 2025. These are the game changers. I just picked these ones up from SSL. These are like what I call a finisher plugin. I have this one here, guitar strip. This one here, it's drum strip here, and another one for vocal strip. Let's start here. This one of all the three is a must-have for me. Obviously, this takes your vocal sort of performance, if you've mixed it up properly in the beginning, to like pro level, and it's really easy to do, and it's done in like 4 steps. And I just go directly, left to right kind of situation. So it's really phenomenal. This is an incredibly useful plugin for both, narrative stuff or just, again, vocals in a lot of way. If you're doing hip hop or anything like that, this thing would save you so much time. There's another plugin down here from Plugin Alliance I'm going to be using on the vocals too during the sort of mixing, the sort of rough mixing stage that I do early on. But when it comes to the finishing stuff, this has got a amazing sort of sound. And honestly, they just tell you the little secrets here. You do a high pass filter. You do a cut, usually somewhere in the low mids, and then you do a boost in the top end. That's it. And the thing is that you're getting all of SSL's knowledge, so they know the best frequencies and the sort of most intuitive ways to shape the sound. Not only are you getting the egghead engineers that make the programs and stuff, but you have people with music knowledge that can listen to it and be like, you got to tweak this to make it sound more real. And that's what this thing brings in spades. It just takes your mix from being like, yeah, that sounds pretty good, like a computer recording. It really does. But then this sounds like it actually was recorded on a real board. So it's amazing. Same thing with the drums. Once I put this on and just added this transient shaper here, this alone would make it worth it. But this is definitely a very good plugin to have with respect to mixing drums and stuff like that, whether you have it on the last channel. I actually have this running into an SSL 4000G in the program, but you could have this as the last one and it sounds absolutely smoking. So another one you can move the order around to. You can just turn them on and off as necessary. So one downside is you see the AB here. I already looked at it under the parameters. You can look under the envelope stuff, and it's sometimes you can select it as the settings, and that lets you go from the A setting to the B setting. But they won't let you do it with the SSL stuff. That's why I would still recommend that you get the Plugin Alliance SSL licensed 4000G, because it has 4 of these A, B, C, D, and you can select them, and that is actually incredibly useful. Now listen, SSL makes a version of their own faders, obviously, and they would probably be worth getting if you didn't really need to worry about the alterations and stuff. But being able to copy that sound over in just a specific section of your mix and be able to turn that into a different EQ profile can be a lifesaver sometimes. So just food for thought. That's the only thing. If you're like, oh, they make the 4000G channel, and they do, get it as a secondary thing. And listen, that's a luxury thing, because I looked at it, it's $150. So oof, this guitar strip here is very nice. I really like the phase correction here. I didn't even realize that there's this whole function, I guess you could say, mixed in here with the delay. I use with the phase on at about between 0.5 here, if I could do it, yeah, and there we go, and of course 1.5, but usually around 1 to 0.5 there's like a sweet spot in there that just fattens your guitar up, makes it sound great, and this or great, sorry. And then of course this weird EQ curve that you can make here, the second order with the really high Q maxed out basically at about 100 hertz or 120, somewhere in here like this, also just makes your guitar just so punchy and fat. Light compression, where you're just sort of, at this point, you should just barely seeing it sort of react. Only in the most extreme instances do you actually see it deflect at all, man. So, you know what I mean? And the other one here with this drive, I like to set it way down here to just 5%. And that makes this whole section quite usable. And you're just like, damn, okay, that makes it sound awesome. And again, of course, there's this whole equalization section if you need it. And most of the time you are going to be making tweaks there. But all three of these are just absolutely phenomenal plugins. I got all three for $40 American. Okay, so sign up for their newsletter. You can join Plugin Boutique. They basically have wish lists. They do newsletters where you'll get these bundles. That's where I got mine from. You can go directly to them. Fantastic. This is well worth it, especially vocals, I would say, and drums for sure. But if you're looking for a tool, an all-in-one for guitars too, this one is definitely worth it. But I'm telling you, with heavy guitars, you need a whole suite of plugins to make them sound awesome like you hear in the records. And that's just a fact, unfortunately, if you're doing it on the computer. So this is just be one of about 4. And we'll go through that another day. But the SSL stuff, absolutely fantastic. I'm sure the rest of it, I'm thinking about picking up their individual units to create the Fusion and do the same thing here, and then just basically build a Fusion sort of, rack mount sort of dealio, and then use that as well on the entire mix or just portions of the mix. I was thinking that might be pretty interesting. So we'll see how that goes. But again, these SSL ones, they're just definitely the vocal one is just like, bam. It's just, wow. Awesome. Next on the list here, we have mastering the mix. Now, listen, this is a secret weapon here. If you're talking mixing, this is all over the place on my mix now. It's basically like a spectral compressor. It just kind of hollows out resonances. And if you want your mix to sound really clean, you just drop a note on here and you start to adjust it, and there it is, boom. And then you can, depending on where this is, you can start to adjust the Q up there. You can see me just rolling the wheel here, but you can see it moving up there in the little blue section, right? So you can adjust this, and then you can just move it back and forth. It's nice. You can lock it into place kind of situation, and then just do vertical moves. It has other sort of functions like this where you can just hear it sort of goes into like, you know, the sort of, this is a little less useful because you'd think that that would sound good, but because you're like, ooh, that sounds really nasty. And then all of a sudden you take it out and it makes it worse. So I like to just put them on here like this. You don't even need to do the calculate targets or nothing else. You just kind of use it as an EQ and move it around until it cleans up your mix, and you'll hear it immediately and you'll be like, oh my God, wow. That just took it like from being kind of out of focus. You turn it off, you're like, okay. And then you turn it back on and you're just like, damn, this is an amazing plugin. It's $100. I got both of these again, $40. This Fuser one here is for sidechain compression, which I've used on compressors and stuff like this. But I'm telling you right now, based on the Rezo, which is, in my opinion, a must-have plugin, this thing is also going to be must-have. You can sort of use it in so many different ways to chain together a bass drum and bass, or other instruments that might be competing in the mix and stuff like that. It has so many applications. I'm sort of just getting ready to use it because it's a little trickier than normal to actually understand how to really maximize sidechain compression. And if you do it wrong, it can ruin your mix. So it's not something you want to just dive into, but something like this is going to be an absolute game changer too. Both of these are secret weapon plugins. So they have other ones too to help you sort of figure out your mix. It's up to you if you want to get them. I don't really care for stuff like that. I just like to figure it out for myself. But these are instantly usable and easy to use. Rezo specifically is so easy to use, where you're just dropping basically a note on there and you're done. Let's look at the plugin alliance stuff here, and these are in no particular order. First off, here is this black box. This is mid-side saturation. Now listen, that's the whole point. I bought this plugin just because it has this mid-side saturation, and I can turn the stereo link off and saturate them differently. That right there is a game changer when it comes to mixing. And this plugin is insane. So it's insanely powerful and very, very useful, because when it comes to a mastering situation, you're not actually doing EQing. You're doing stuff more like this, where you're kind of fattening it up by adding and layering in another signal, but you're starting to saturate that signal to make it sort of clash a little bit with your original one, to make it sound thicker and fuller and more dense. So, and now that you can do the mid and side independently, right, and you can sort of adjust each one of these frequency ranges, and there's 3 now per sort of mid and side, boom, massive levels of control, which is what you really need. You're like, I want way more of the saturation here with respect to the low end, but on this one here, I don't want any. None. Everything's off. And you might be like, okay, make it as wide as possible, or whatever you're going to do, right? So that's just it. You sort of learn your way through it, if you will, but once you pull it out or you dial it in and stuff like that, you'll be like, wow, what a difference it is just doing that one thing. Even if it was at 50% or 25, it doesn't matter. You just start bringing it in, and you're just like, here's the thing. With mixing, there's the broad sweep. So you start this, you're going to do this big, huge sweep across like this, you know what I mean? Where you get like everything, and you'll hear it go way up in sort of treble or whatever, close front to back, whatever it is. But then you'll get to be like, right there, it sounds pretty good. It's like full and in your face, and it's not really aggressive or wimpy or anything like that. And boom, there it is. You've got yourself set up, and then you can sort of adjust. Now, I like to set the boost usually to like 1 dB, sometimes as little as half a dB, and start messing with that. You don't want to get into situations where you're doing 5 dB. That to me is not good. Use 3 or 4 different saturators, but just use a tiny bit on each one, and your mixes will sound way better. That's a mistake I've made so many times. Okay, so this bad boy right here is definitely worth having. This is my favorite compressor. This is the best compressor ever for guitars and bass and stuff. There it is. I'm just throwing it on there. It was my favorite from last year. It's still my favorite from this year. It is absolutely amazing what this thing can do. It's so natural sounding. And just on its own, just your guitar sound going through this can turn into something absolutely ferocious. So this thing is badass as hell, which leads into the one for the bass guitar. This one here, which is, I think it's like LA2A or something. I don't know. I don't really follow the technical jargon, but this is the compressor for bass. And I just picked it up. It was like cheap, $20, and I was just like, damn. It's also going on the vocals, because it's just so creamy, so perfect. You're just like, pfft. And it's so simple, right? Fast, slow kind of situation. Dial in the input, crank down the output until you're ready to go. Again, mid-side compression. This bottom strip down here with the addition and subtraction of headroom, the high pass sidechain filtration, so you're just bypassing the compressor altogether up to a point. The mono maker is a life changer. Actually, it really does create a really tight, powerful, punchy mix. And stereo width, which I don't really use, but is also another sort of like nice little addition, including the parallel mix. and this randomized channel here, which has up to 20 different ones, you know, where they all have like a different kind of like analog vibe and feel. They sound wider or thinner or sort of more up the center or whatever you want to call it. It has a noticeable sort of impact on the sound characteristic. These things basically add the character to your mix and make it way more believable than any other plugin I've ever used. And again, for $20, this thing is amazing. Okay, you know what I mean? For $20, you're not going to get another compressor that's, you know, as good for $20. It's incredibly usable across the spectrum, and it sounds amazing, and it works awesome. The end. Okay, so next on the list here, this one here's on my 2-bus, this Elysia version 2 of the Alpha Mix or Alpha Master or Master Alpha or whatever it is. I don't know. Don't care. But this thing is just like, wow. Okay, on your 2-bus, your Master, this is where it lives, and it is absolutely top notch. And again, they added this whole bottom section, which makes a huge difference, especially the gain limiting down here now. Just, oh my God, the difference in control you get with that, it's just psychotic. So this is another compressor. This one's a lot more expensive because they just did a big update to it. And I would get this version as opposed to getting the previous version. Just saying it. It's just that much better, and the algorithm has just been massively updated, so it sounds so crispy and juicy. It's just awesome. Right, so there's those two there. This is a preamp. I didn't really understand this thing. I thought it was kind of more like a compressor here with this, but it acts more as like a preamp, and this right here is one of my favorites now. Running your bass through this is a game changer. You know what I mean? Like running guitars through this, especially after you run through like an SSL 4000 channel strip. You'll just use this a little bit more, just, you know, shave off a little bit and dial it in. And, you know, a little more drive, bass, high end here. I like to turn the level down and then start to mess with either the makeup and stuff, or set the makeup at like, you know, like 1 dB, and then just kind of rail the level a little bit more to make it work hotter, but then turn down the overall track volume like that. So, you know, it's your call, but stuff like that makes a really big difference. And this thing is just so versatile and so natural sounding. That's the thing, is if you have like a guitar that sounds really sterile, it's like no life into it, this thing gives it life. And then, of course, consider throwing on, you know, some modulation or something like that and tucking it in underneath. It'll also help make your guitar sound fatter, bigger, and more sort of like natural. But it's a bit of a, you know, an art form to get it just to mesh it. It's like, you know, shading. That's what you're talking about. Next here, this is my new mastering limiter. It's based on analog technology. Now, listen, you can rail this if you want to, but just having it at just like the 2 here and usually at 0 is enough to just be like, wow. Just playing around with the trim here in the release, and then again, of course, some of the stuff down here that you can mess with down at the bottom. This thing is, again, I have a couple other limiters, and they sound good, and they get the job done for sure, but this one sounds more crushing. You know what I mean? Like when you put it on, it's just like immediate weight to the music. You're just like, oh, wow. Okay, so now listen, it takes a bit of finessing, if you will, but damn. This is my favorite limiter, and I'm gonna use this and then go into probably another limiter lightly at the very end of the chain, just to push it that extra like half dB. That's it. But this will be doing most of the work. And listen, I mix loud, so I don't have to do a lot of limiting. I was like, you know, do I really want to have to rail this up to like +4? Because I've done that, and you start adding a lot of distortion in there, but that's just it. This thing here, you can start going like crazy up here to 8 and really start railing it up and just turn the parallel mix down. And you can get like this crazy distortion over top of guitars and stuff. It's pretty cool, actually. So it's a lot more powerful than just, a mastering limiter. You can actually do audio things with it too, and just smash and crush things. But yeah, this is definitely the best limiter I've ever used. And it kind of looks scary, but it's really not. Honestly, once you start messing with it, it's just like a compressor, just a little bit more fancy, I guess. This is a secondary version of the Louder Than Liftoff Silver Bullet. This is my go-to saturator. For doing like global things like mix buses and stuff like that. It's just phenomenal. The trick is to turn it's usually this stuff is all, oops, sorry, you see there, it's the gain link, it's always on, so you want to turn all this stuff off. Why is that keep doing that? Okay, well, I'm just gonna deal with it later. The thing here is that you turn the gain all the way down and you turn the output all the way off too. I don't know why it's deciding to just gang them together, but it's just having a moment. But yeah, this just adding in a little bit of the output or a little bit of the gain is usually enough to just take your guitar from sounding kind of wimpy to wow, God tier. The thing is there's a tendency to want to sort of crank it up, and I would avoid that, especially even here. You can just take this all the way down and just be done with it, kind of deal, right? So this I leave all the way up, but in this other case, that's so interesting where it just doesn't want to allow me to turn that off. Like, is that weird, or is it just me? I'm pretty sure it's just me. Okay, there it is, the saturator. Amazing. Next here, this sort of transient shaper. I didn't realize how important this is as a studio tool. Now listen, this one's $20. You can get whichever one you want. But having a transient shaper can be the difference to making something sound really punchy and in your face, even on guitars and bass and stuff like that, especially in the early mixing stages. It's a little more tricky, obviously. But de-essing is another one that is an art form. So the transient shaping and the de-essing, although I didn't add the de-esser here, but it's the same diff. And I use SPL for all of them because this one sounds incredibly musical. And the fact of the matter is if you want pro mixes, you have to mess around with stuff like this, okay? Next on the list, yeah, the Vitalizer, now the MK3. This thing is a beast, and it gives you what I call that, professional LA shine on your release. So just dialing in a bit of this bad boy, usually around the 1K or 1.5K mark here, and usually this bad boy, I think it's somewhere around there, 2 or 1.75, 2.5, and just dial in a bit of this. It just gives like this incredible top end. Plus, there's this insane control you get now with the bass here, and that can be a game changer, especially with this little compression section engaged. So this little triangle of love right here for the low end is just next level. I noticed immediately that made a huge difference from taking the bass from sounding kind of flubby to really tight and boomy right in your face, just boom, boom, boom. It just hits, but in a really musically pleasing way, not just, with a bunch of high end. So if you're looking for one plugin to be like, I need to make my bass and my guitars shine and have that really crystal top end, or maybe the vocals would be another one, strings would be another one, this thing would definitely be high on the list. Next, this is going to live on my vocal bus. This is the new processing chain. It's basically a channel strip, but it's a lot more complicated than you would think. This company, Vertigo, their plugins are ridiculous. They're awesome. And again, the thing is I'm pretty sure. We'll see here in a sec. Here, we'll just take a look. Maybe not. I don't see it. Sometimes it says setting, other times it says something else, but I don't see it in there. So I guess this one you can't really move. Unfortunately, it's nice when you can manipulate this. BX seems to be the company that does that. So if anybody from Plugin Alliance watches these videos, you might want to make that standard on all of them, because that's one of the most useful functions of all time. But still, this one here is perfect for acoustic guitars, classical guitars, vocals, any type of like analog instrument. Piano would be amazing through this, stringed instruments, violin, cello, anything like that. Probably any sort of brass instrument too. It's just got that ability to give it analog warmth and a huge variation to be able to actually accomplish it. You would not believe the sheer number of combinations you get with this thing. It's insane. I only messed around with it for like 20 minutes. I was just like, wow, there's so much going on here, especially when you can turn things on and off, right? So that's the point, is you start to realize that these plugins are far more complex than what you actually thought. And of course, you can start to automate some of this stuff too, which I wouldn't recommend. But this working in conjunction with the SSL stuff, right? That would be, you know, again, insanely important to, you know, get a really, really professional sound. So again, instead of just using your standard channel strip, I'm now factoring in something like this, which has got different kinds of like tube saturation here. You know what I mean? This is a discrete gyrator EQ. Okay, I don't know what that means, but I'll start messing with it. There's the VCA compressor, which also sounds great. I have their other version from the 70s. It's killer. And then just your standard high-low pass filter, right? Input, output. But if you just run the audio through this with everything off, it sounds absolutely blistering, right? You're just like, notice the instant sort of increase in saturation. And especially when you start to crank up the input and then just turn down the output a bit. So you're, you know, when you're starting to, you know, a little bit of, you know what I mean? Slow attack here. A bit on the threshold, a fast release, you know what I mean? And then just essentially dial in, you know, 4-to-1, and then start just pumping the input here until you're seeing a good amount of sort of reduction on this, so that you can, and usually you want to set it fairly high kind of thing, you know, so that this doesn't have to be as high. And that way you can just start backing off the threshold, right? And then adjusting the outputs. And then of course, when you're like, okay, these three things, the input volume, hitting the compressor, which is going to be on, and you're going to be doing whatever you're doing here. And the output is basically working the best, right? And then of course, from there, you can then start messing around with the high-low pass filter, because you might adjust the low end here and be like, okay, that's changed it, so you have to now mess with the threshold and the low end to get that to sit right again. But now it's cleaned it up hugely. You know what I mean? So you're trying to find like a relative compression value and then jump in there. It's not just go right to filtration. Then this one, a lot of people, and I do too, used to work across, but it's like working with each one. You want to compress the signal first, and then I can clean it up, but then dial it in more with the compressor. These settings are never set in stone. Let's make it that way. So, okay, that's a big one. And you might be like, okay, from the filtration now, I want to add the saturation, right? You're like adding the drive here, which is going to add high end. And now you're starting to mess with the high end here, right? To get it to sit right. That's why you would do that. And then, of course, when you've got it, everything tickety-boo, and you're like, that sounds pretty damn good, that's when you bring in the EQ. And obviously, you're going to turn all this stuff off to start with and just start with one and just dial in. You know, I, again, use literally about 1 dB or something like that. Something very small, just to cycle through with a big run like that, and then get into the right position, be like, boom, right there. That's the sweet spot. Check the different ones, like, okay, that's got a more aggressive slope on it or whatever. Looks like a little dip. This is the best one, and then dial it in or put it on here, go back and forth. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. And boom, you will find that your mixes go like so much higher in terms of output quality, because honestly, it's the simple little moves like that that make all the difference. But again, thinking in terms of the order of the instruments and getting them to work and sit the best, rather than just trying to be like, I'll just EQ the problem away. You know what I mean? That's a fatal error in thinking. You got to get this stuff all working together, and then at the very end, use the EQ to make it sound just that much better. Boom, it's the icing on the cake. And then last one here, of course, is just this this is a stereo widener. Again, SPL. This is the only one I use now. It's the most musical by far, for sure. It's got the secondary section. The mono maker is a life changer, especially around 30 hertz. You're just like, okay, boom. Right, a little bit here, usually down and up like that. But it really depends, and the fact of the matter is it's so musical. Now listen, the thing with the stereo widening is it's tucked way down low in the mix. When I put mine on, it's like at minus 50 dB mixed in underneath, so you don't really want to notice it that much. It just adds a little extra sort of width to the sound and makes it sound fuller. But it should be very, very subtle. I never do anything like that where I'm cranking it on. That's an effect, unless in usually doing it on something that you know, like a solo instrument. When you're talking about a mix, you're like between minimum and 3 usually is and 3 is extreme. So you're somewhere in here, and then it's just a question of playing with this and the mono maker. And of course, you can always mess with output, but a lot of times you're not even seeing the meter move, so you don't have to do anything with output. It's great. Remember, most of this stuff is just supposed to be tucked in underneath the mix, underneath the sound of the SSL, so you're not really wanting anything like this to be like seeing it just maxed out or anything crazy like that. And trust me, I was doing my mix this morning. It sounds absolutely killer. So there it is. There's the whole list. Right, when you're talking stereo widening, boom, done. When you're talking channel strip with analog characteristics, boom, done. When you're talking about finishing, polish, boom, MK. Transient designers and de-essers, ultra important. Saturation is king. Make sure you go through that bad boy. Limiting. Now in this case, it's a look ahead analog limiter, so it's very specific to a type of sound and stuff, but it's very clean, very, very precise. So that's why I picked this one up, and it sounds amazing too. A preamp, how to use it. This one also comes with a very, very cool sort of like analog and retro, and there's also this little travel button here. Most people don't know that. Careful. It's useful too. You can usually dial it down to like 25%, and then you sort of play with these between 1 and 3, and sometimes between 3 and 6 up here. And honestly, it just like, wow, it just brings it right into focus. It's amazing. 2-bus compressor, right? The bass compressor plus overall vocal compressor, amazing. Guitar compressor extraordinaire, done. Then mid-side saturation. That right there is, again, another game changer. Being able to do saturation mid-side in 3 different bands. Man, oh man, that is top-notch. Reso here, definitely spectral compression is what I call it. Basically wipes out resonances. This is everywhere on my mix, and it cleans everything up. It is an absolutely indispensable plugin. It's absolutely killer. And last but not least, of course, you have the SSL stuff here. Vocal strip, if you're looking for that professional sort of like LA, like super polished vocals, it's just wow. Oh man, I put it on today and I was just blown away. I've been doing vocals for 6 years and they've sounded okay, but this today with this on, I was just like, damn, that's the best they've ever sounded ever. And all I did was tweak it ever so slightly. I think I put this at 5-1, And I'm like, oh my God. It was just like, and I think I had 50 milliseconds for the attack, and that was it. I was just like, that sounds so good. And then again, you just lightly touch this, lightly move it up a little bit, these two knobs, whatever that does. Who cares? It just sounds so good. The drums too, with this transient shaper, just takes your drums from being like, that sounds pretty good, to being like, oh my God, it broke my nose. That snare sound just broke my nose. It hit me in the face so hard. And the guitar strip here is a great plugin. I love this, actually. This is basically on all my guitar tracks now because it works really good with my setup. But if you're looking for a plugin that actually works well, just overall with guitars and bass, this bad boy here, you cannot go wrong. I wouldn't say it's essential, but it is very, very, very good. And if you can scoop up all three for $40 like I did, I mean, win overall. So that's the video. I hope it helps everybody. You know, just get a few newsletters going on from some of these corporations, Solid State and stuff like that, and just look for the deals that are coming up at Christmas time, and you'll scoop them up in no time. And just have a plan. Be like, what do I really need? Pick 4 to 6 plugins and be like, what do I really need? And then sort of sit down and figure out what that is. Who's going to best sort of offer up the plugin that gets done the job that you want done in the workflow that you like working in. That matters. You know what I mean? Now, listen, I'm a little bit more used to just working with this chaotic nonsense because I know what this stuff means now after so long. But don't be intimidated by it. A lot of it is just sort of like sitting there, turn the compressor on, and no, you can't really mess with the order and whatnot. So it's fine. You just turn them on, and I use all of them. That's the whole point. Just dial this way back and dial it in from there, and you'll be like, oh man, that sounds awesome. Okay, and that's just it. That's one of those things with the mix. Do the big wide sweep so you get everything going at once and be like, right here it sounds like it's the best, and then just slow down. You can usually hold the control key and it'll go super slow, just one number at a time, right? And then you're like, there it is. There's the sweet spot right there. Boom, done. And just keep doing that. Now, normally you don't go into the negative here. So in this case, you're going to kind of sweep here and then go wider like that until you do the whole thing. And then be like, okay, in this case, it's around, 15% or something, or 5% or 8%. And again, you sort of do like a small one back, you know what I mean? So you get a noticeable change in the sound, and then just find the one area you're like, right there, it sounds the best with respect to punch. By doing stuff like that, just that one simple technique, you'll find that your mixes get so much better, because a lot of people will be like, oh, well, that sounds pretty good, and just stop. Well, you can't really tell if it sounds better up here or down here if you never actually go up here. So sort of start at the 0 position and sort of cycle through until you're like, okay, well, up here, obviously that's pointless. But in here, like the 10 to sort of like 30 degree area, okay, well, that's our 10% to 30%. Good to go, right? So again, it's never just the plugins. Sometimes it's how you're using them. And it's, again, a lot of people would have this at 100% instead of starting way down here at 5%. Okay? And you're like, okay, well, that makes a big difference when you're using the equalization. And here's the thing. Instead of equalizing at before you do drive, obviously the drive's going to add top end. So if you do equalization, you can take off some of the top end if it gets a little crispy here. Just like you can adjust the low pass filter here. Okay, or the high pass filter, whatever. So there it is. That is the video, but I wanted to go over that just really quickly. With any plugin, realistically speaking, you have to kind of sit there and be like, okay, when I crank it all the way up here, I'm seeing a lot of reductions. So I'm going to dial it back to like minus 17 here and be like, okay, I just barely saw it there. And then you know that's when it's at the right place. If this is at the, the end sort of your signal chain, because it's barely doing any compression at all, but it just catches a few peaks here and there. And that's what you want. It goes incrementally like that, just a little bit more compression in the earlier stages, but not much. And the thing is it's all dynamics control, just kind of moving up the food chain. But doing things like that is going to be invaluable to you. So I hope some of these plugins help you out, and I appreciate every single one of you. We'll see you in the next one.